Okay, this is just going to be a quick update on my game engine. I've been working on the editor, so I added editor viewport controls and asset management since the last update. To start off, I added zooming with the middle mouse button or the scroll wheel. That's just similar to Blender. It's an easy way to navigate the scene. You can hold shift middle mouse button to pan, and if you pan over and then you use middle mouse button to orbit, you orbit around a different center location. And if you click on an actor and press F, you can focus on them, and that changes where you orbit around. Makes navigating the scene a lot easier, I think. I also added transform controls for translating, rotating, and scaling, very similar to Blender. Press the G key, you can translate. It's on the view plane, so it will move in different directions based on how you're looking at it. R is for rotate, also rotates around your view axis. If you hold shift, it'll rotate slower. And S is for scale. You can only scale uniformly right now, and I think I might keep it that way. Although sometimes it is handy to be able to scale and smush things down for like creating floors and walls and things like that. You can still do that in the properties. Anyway, if you scale or do any of the transform tools and you're unhappy, you can right click and it aborts the operation, sending it back to its original position or location or rotation. You can also, while you're in a transform mode, you can hit X, Y, or Z to lock the axis. So if I hit X while rotating, it locks it to rotating around the global X axis, Y, and Z. That also works for translate. But with translate, you can also lock the plane of movement too. So if I hit G and then shift Y, then you're only moving in the XZ plane. That's great for putting, helping you put objects where they need to be and lining things up. And you just saw that I had those lines rendering, so while I did that, I also tried adding a grid. And this might not be too handy, and right now it just renders a 10 by 10 grid, and you can't really change it, but maybe in the future I'll make it so that you could change it to like every 10 units there's a line instead of every 1 unit. But it's bound to Control G, and it might be helpful in the future. I also added the Blender style camera locking controls, so you can press 1 to lock to the forward perspective, 3 to the right, and 7 to the top. And if you hit Control 1, you go to the back, Control 3 to the left or the right, whichever one, and then Control 7 is the bottom view. And I use these all the time for lining things up, and it's usually most handy in orthographic view, so you can press 5 on the numpad to go into orthographic mode. So if I pan, I don't really see any perspective. If I go back to perspective mode, you can definitely see some parallax happening when I go there, when I move back and forth. So I usually do this in orthographic mode when I'm using the side view or the locked camera angles. And then also it's handy to go into wireframe. So I also added the Z key for entering wireframe mode. Next up, I added the ability to spawn actors, and right now I did it in a really simple way. You can't spawn in like a subclass of an actor really that you created in your game code. You can only spawn specifically static mesh actors, point light actors, directional light actors, and empty transform actors. And I bound those to control 1, 2, 3, 4. It it was just a simpler way to do it. In the future, I want to have a list come up that lets you scroll through and select an option for what type of actor you want to spawn. And also in the future, I'd like to be able to arbitrarily add components over in this hierarchy panel, which isn't even, technically a hierarchy. These components are hooked up in a hierarchy, but I just haven't shown that here. But in the future, I'd like to have a add component button that lets you spawn a component too. But that's not critical right now. So if I want to spawn a static mesh, I can press Control 1. And I have it spawning at your focus location. So if I go over here, I'll spawn it right at the center, and I'll orbit around it. I press Control 2 to spawn a light. And Control 3 for an empty transform, which really, I think maybe you could use it for just giving something a special name and searching for it in your game to know where to spawn something or where to look for something. I think it could be handy. But yeah, so that's there for now. I also added duplication, so you can click an actor and press Control D to duplicate it. And it actually duplicates the actor. So in this case, this actor has all these components. If I can press Control D, it duplicates the whole actor. And now onto the assets. So right now my asset pane shows no assets in it because I haven't set my project directory yet. If I hit Control P, it will bring up a Windows dialog for selecting a file, and so I have a project file which is kind of empty right now, but it uses that to find the directory that you want to look for assets in. And then these folders appear, and you can go into folders, and right now the only assets I have are static meshes and textures. Kind of colored them similarly to Unreal. And right now you can really only use static meshes. You can assign them on static mesh asset properties. So if I click this monkey right here and assign a duck to it, it replaces it with the duck. And if I click that duck and duplicate it, it duplicates the correct mesh. And yeah, right now the only way you can assign the static mesh is by clicking on it, having it as the selected asset, and then hitting this little button to assign the selected asset to the static mesh property. And also, if you spawn a new static mesh with Control 1, it will spawn the mesh that you have selected if you do have a mesh selected. I added the delete key in the viewport and the outliner panel. If you have your mouse hovering over, you can delete stuff, whatever you have selected. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll just do a kind of a little demo where I spawn some meshes and move things around. So let's just go into my local meshes. I'll spawn an island. This is from Duckball, the other game I was working on. And yeah, that was spawning with Control 1, and I can spawn a palm tree. That's a bit bigger. I can scale it down. I can translate it over, rotate it a bit, duplicate, rotate. Focus on this. Scale it a little bit. Have some basic shapes also. These aren't textured. But right now, there's no materials or anything, but Collada meshes that I import can have a texture name assigned to them, and it'll, when loading the static mesh, it'll look for that texture name. And I'm also reference counting all of these assets, and that's probably how I'll manage things in the future. Like whenever a static mesh gets assigned whenever a static mesh component gets assigned a static mesh, it'll increment that reference count, and I'll expose an option to clean up all the unreferenced assets that can be called, like in between level loads or something, and hopefully that will be enough to keep memory down. We will see. I'll spawn a light, increase its radius to like 10. You can change its color, make it really red. You can change the default light, which is a directional light, and you can make it kind of blue. Point lights don't have any mesh proxy rendering for them right now, which is unfortunate. I might add that in the future, but honestly I feel like lights are going to be kind of rare, especially if I'm targeting 3DS and really old systems. Lights are going to be really expensive, and I'll probably just have one directional light, and that will probably be it. I still have to convert this whole renderer to a simple forward renderer right now. Right now it's all deferred. You can see the gbuffer visualization right here. I stripped out all normal mapping to keep things simple, especially for porting to other platforms. I spawned a Susan. I'm not even using the PBR gbuffers anymore for metallic and roughness. I do have a position buffer. I realize I probably don't need that, but that was just easier for me to think about. But anyway, I'll be getting rid of all these gbuffers and switching to like a really simple forward renderer, nothing fancy. And yeah, so anyway, that's the update. The next step is going to be making assets serializable into their own file formats instead of using collada.dae files and .png files. I'll import those with some hotkey for now in the editor, and it'll convert that to a custom file format, basically just going off of what Unreal does, because it kind of makes sense to me, and that way I have a little more control and I can strip out the assemp references in my game, my runtime game, not the editor. And I think that will make porting a lot easier, not having to worry about a lot of external libraries. I really only have assemp right now and GLM for math, if you can count that. But I'm trying to keep it really slim to make this engine as portable as possible, which is kind of the idea. But it's also just to have fun. So anyway, that's the engine update for now. Thank you for watching.